John Harbaugh hinted at some big Baltimore Ravens bye-week changes, and some of those changes absolutely need to be made. We talk about what he had to say and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We're 5 days a week plus more here of daily Ravens coverage and content. We have a jam-packed episode today. We're going to be talking about, in the first part of the show, John Harbaugh hinting at some big Baltimore Ravens bye-week changes, some of which are roster-wise for the Ravens with the guys they currently have, and others could maybe come from outside the organization. So we'll talk about that in the first part of the show again. Then in the second part of the show, we'll dive into a big Ravens trade opportunity arising after a firing, first head coach firing of the NFL season. We'll dive into that, and then we'll dive into some more Ravens and Rams notes from week 6, stuff the Ravens can hopefully build on heading into week 8 after this upcoming bye week, and things that are still concern points for this Ravens team. So thank you again for being here. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Well, we know the Ravens are 1-5 entering their bye week. We know things have to change. How many changes will the Ravens actually make? Of course, we're not going to know that until they happen or don't. But John Harbaugh, during his Monday availability, he hinted at some potential changes. Now, the first one that I want to talk about, and I think the biggest one that everybody's looking at right now, is on the offensive line. The offensive line for Baltimore, we can all say it, it's bad. It's really, really bad right now. And actually, shout out to Bull Smoka over at Pressbox, who put together a little bit about just the Ravens right now, where their offensive linemen rank according to PFF. Now, the top grade, Andrew Voorhees actually graded out very well on PFF. And I know some people value PFF, other people don't, grade system or whatnot. Andrew Voorhees graded out well for week 6 against the Rams. But Bo put this all here through 6 games. PFF positional ranks for the Ravens offensive linemen. Ronnie Stanley, 24th among all tackles. Andrew Voorhees, 40th among guards. Tyler Linderbaum, 4th among centers. Daniel Falele, 45th among guards, and Roger Rosengarten, 38th among tackles. So it has not been good for the Ravens this year. Again, Linderbaum has really been the only bright spot for them in terms of those grades. And even Linderbaum at times has looked overmatched. And I think for Linderbaum, honestly, I think it's less about him in some of these instances and more about the play surrounding him. And he has to make up for a lot. And he has when it's come to Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees this season. But John Harbaugh was asked about potentially changing up the offensive line a little bit. The question was, you guys are always under evaluation. You're always looking at it. Are you considering any changes on the offensive line, given a guy like Emory Jones once he's fully back, or Corey Bullock, or any of those guys, essentially giving them opportunities? And John Harbaugh said, quote, absolutely, we're considering those kinds of options for sure. That's kind of what the bye week is for. I think it helps you with that. Those guys will get a chance to practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, which will be good for us to get those guys out there and see them. Emory, for instance, he's a young dude. He's only been practicing for a week. There's a lot that goes into knowing what you're supposed to do under fire and pass protection. He hasn't done any pass protections yet because of his shoulder. So he hasn't. This will be the first week he'll have a chance to do pass protection. He hasn't been able to do that up until now. So you can kind of see the challenges there with that. But we're trying to get him up to speed as quickly as we possibly can. So he's available. We wouldn't put a player out there until they're ready to be successful. That wouldn't be fair to the player or to the team or to the fans or for anybody. But as soon as we feel like a guy like him or anybody else is really ready or the best guy for it, we would do it. So again, and Emory Jones, I get that people want to see him in action. I would love to see him in action personally. I don't know if that's the most realistic option to slot in for the Ravens on the offensive line. I think they certainly, and again, Harbaugh kind of alluded to it there, like if they feel like he's ready and he gets up to speed, he could be a guy that gets inserted. I'm not sure that's just like a week 7 bye week, then week 8 against the Bears. Does he have enough time to prepare for that for his first ever NFL action? Again, remember, he didn't practice at all during practically the entire offseason program, right? So he really needs to get up to speed. I would love to see Corey Bullock personally. I think he really impressed me during the preseason. It's a great story, but, it's not just about his story. It's about how good of a football player I think he is and how good of a football player I think he can be for this Ravens team. Honestly, at this point, anything is an upgrade right now over Daniel Faalele. Again, Voorhees played better in that game against the Rams. So, look, I'm willing to give Voorhees another week here, but I think it's time for Faalele to officially bow out here. And again, probably was time earlier than this, right? I think the Ravens, and we'll have a conversation about Eric DeCosta a little bit later in the show, but just to kind of preview that, I do think the Ravens really messed up their guard position this offseason. And if you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens for a while, I mean, even if you just became a listener during this offseason, I've been saying that the Ravens did not approach this guard position properly. I think the Ravens, what they needed to do with this guard position is they needed to bring in more competition. Essentially, I feel like they handed the guard job to Faalele. If you want to throw that Voorhees conversation in there too, you can. But I think Baltimore too easily handed the guard positions out. I think they just kind of said, all right, these are our guys. We're going to play them. And their only addition in there was Emory Jones, who, the injury situation wasn't what they wanted. And, I'm sure he would have been competition, but it felt like they had made up their mind before any program began. And I think that was the wrong way to approach it. They needed competition in, they didn't do it. And now it is biting them. Now, they made this bet. Now they have to lay in it, right? This is what it is. And it's hard to rebuild an offensive line during a season. Why? Because everybody needs offensive linemen and no one is willing to give them up because everybody needs them. So you essentially are stuck with what you have. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit what options could be in the second part of the show with an opportunity that just opened up. But right now, you do need to change things on this offensive line. It's not working, and it's become a huge detriment. Even when Lamar was in there and putting up points, you could see the frustrations and some of the things with Lamar. And, it's difficult because, Lamar props up so much, right? We talked about that yesterday. I think the NFL world is finally waking up to how valuable Lamar Jackson is to this Baltimore Ravens team. We went through the stats yesterday. The Ravens in the 2 games without Lamar Jackson are averaging just 6.5 points per game, and they've lost their last 5 without Lamar Jackson. And actually, shout out to Sarah Ellison, who put out a tweet about some of the other stats behind Lamar Jackson's absence, which kind of give even more perspective. The Ravens, with and without Lamar in 2025, 32.8 points per game with Lamar, 6.5 without, like we just talked about. Yards per game, 338 with Lamar, 251.8 without Lamar. And Sarah noting here, in 4 weeks of play prior to the injury, Lamar led the league in touchdowns with 10, passer rating with 130.5, and those 32.8s per game were ranked number 3. So with Lamar out there, they were putting up numbers, but even still, you could tell like he was elevating these guys around him. And we're seeing with Cooper Rush, and we saw this during the preseason, right? We saw this during the preseason where Cooper Rush just couldn't escape some of those quick pressures because, again, with Daniel Faalele, we've seen it on tape. There are instances from this game against the Rams in week 6. We could go back to the first game against the Colts where he got, just absolutely bullied back. He loses so fast, and Lamar is able to escape some of those, right? He's able to mask that even when the reps aren't good from the O-linemen. But Ronnie Stanley has been injured, and, the ankle is kind of being weird on him, and Rosengarten's regressed. The guard play we've talked about. You have to make a change because, Lamar Jackson, he's making things happen and he's putting up these points, and the offense is putting up points with him. Yes, he's probably going to be back for the Bears game in week 8. At least that's the assumption and the hope. But at the end of the day, Lamar needs to have the best team around him possible. There are potential options to maybe go out and get a guy, but when you look at this roster, I don't think the Ravens are putting the best team out there for Lamar Jackson. I honestly don't think the Ravens are putting their best 5 offensive linemen out there. I don't know what it is with Daniel Faalele. John Harbaugh clearly loves him, clearly has a loyalty to him. I just think that he hasn't earned it. Like, I get that transitioning from tackle to guard is tough. You put in a lot of work this offseason to try to get his body right, but it's clearly not working. They need to make a change there. I think Bullock for Faalele makes a lot of sense. I think that's the move they should make. Again, I'm willing to give Voorhees an extra week, with his play against the Rams, which was better, but they do need to make that change for sure. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll wrap up the changes that John Harbaugh hinted at for this Ravens team and dive into another one that he talked about as well, is diving into a big trade opportunity that just opened up for Eric DeCosta on the Baltimore Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. And I love that with BILT, your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay. Whether I'm grabbing food at my favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, I'm still earning rewards. BILT has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. And this show was brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. That's exactly where Rugiet's Go Long comes in. This isn't just another 3D pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula. The effects can last up to 36 hours, and the process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show. The Ravens are 1-5. They now enter their bye week, and we talked about a big hint that John Harbaugh gave it, a potential bye week change on that offensive line. We're going to dive into another change John Harbaugh hinted at here in the second part of the show. First, though, I want to remind everyone we're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens. Monday through Friday is our regular show, 6 a.m. Eastern time is when that comes out, and then of course, we have bonus episodes on the weekends when the headlines permit. We have during game days. We got the pregame shows in the morning. Then we got the Locked On Ravens watch alongs where we react live to every single play, every single game. We got the instant reaction shows after that. Got instant reaction shows to big news when it drops, as well as the Locked On Ravens squad show twice a week with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. So much Ravens coverage and content. Be sure hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for that 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Now, let's talk about this other change John Harbaugh hinted at, and that is the edge room, the outside linebackers. We know the Ravens are in a dire spot with that group right now. The Ravens traded Odafe Oweh to the Los Angeles Chargers, and they got back safety help. And then in the game against the Rams, Tavius Robinson broke his foot. Now, John Harbaugh did reveal that both Tavius Robinson and Adisa Isaac, both those guys will likely return this season, right? That they're not season-ending injuries. So again, we don't know exactly when those guys will come back, but John Harbaugh saying, yeah, they'll come back. Now we'll have to see when. But in the meantime, your edge room consists of Kyle Van Noy, Mike Green, and David Ajabo. So you're gonna have to get creative in terms of how you address that, because if you want another stat that you're probably going to want to cover your ears for. We've had a lot of those moments here. We've had a lot of the cover your ears moments defensively for stats. It's not going to be good what I'm about to say here. No Ravens edge rusher recorded a pressure in week 6. 0 pressures. John Jenkins, 3 pressures. Teddy Buchanan and Kyle Hamilton, 2 pressures. Trenton Simpson and Travis Jones, 1 pressure. That's really tough. That's really tough. And I don't know if the Ravens feel confident enough in the guys they already have right now. And Pedro Roarms here giving a little more insight, saying that those guys, Mike Green, David Ojabo, Calvin, Noitavius Robinson, combined for 109 snaps against the Rams and 0 pressures against the league's 6th worst offensive line in pass blocking. That is a 50.5 grade according to PFF. Not great. Not great. Now, John Harbaugh talked about that a little bit, and he was asked, the question was, quote, do you sense that with the injury to Tavius Robinson and Rafe Owe traded, you've only got 3 guys? Do you anticipate looking outside the organization or promoting from within? I assume you won't go forward with just 3 outside linebackers. And John Harbaugh said yes to all the above, I would say. We have a couple guys that we like on the practice squad right now. They're doing really well, so I wouldn't mind giving those guys a shot, one of those guys at least. So that's our option number 1. And the most obvious option. And then there are the other options you're talking about that are certainly on the table. So John Harbaugh saying a lot of stuff is on the table. And honestly, we can go back to the offensive line for a second, because when asked about the O-line, John Harbaugh in his answer did say, quote, we do have a couple of veteran guys that could in the offensive line that have been practicing that would have a shot that we'll take a look at this week. But that stuff is definitely on the table. So a lot of stuff on the table for the Ravens here. Now, offensive line-wise, I think they're truly going to go rotate through guys, look at guys, because right now, John Harbaugh's correct. Like, the bye week is the time to do this, right? Get the outside linebacker that you need into the building. I think that they probably need to go outside the organization for this. I mean, you have guys like K'Mon Rucker on the practice squad, and he's someone that's intriguing, but at the same time, do you have enough trust in him to play significant snaps in a time where, if you're really trying to save your season, is that someone you want to rely on in a role like that? They also have Malik Cam on the practice squad. I'd like to see Malik. Maybe Malik Cam could be an option for them. I think that could be someone that makes a big impact potentially. We see the potential there, but I would feel more comfortable now. If you're looking at, we'll do again live research here. We'll look at some OLB free agents 2025 who's still available. We will see. I don't think it's a lot of guys, though. I mean, on the outside linebacker or edge guys, it's guys like Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, he certainly is ready to pass rush again, although I don't think it's a fit for Baltimore. Carl Lawson, guys like DeMarcus Walker, not a lot. Tyus Bowser, let's just bring the whole band back together. Get Tyus back in the building, get Ngakoue back in the building, and the Ravens. Let's just have a whole reunion tour here. Speaking of that, actually, Zadarius Smith retired from the Eagles yesterday, so that maybe that he could unretire and the Ravens could get him. I don't know. I'm just kidding about that. But the Ravens need something in that outside linebacker department. They also probably need to go get an offensive lineman, maybe sign a guy to the practice squad. That probably will be more internal on the O-line. But there is a possibility the Ravens could go out there because, again, John Harbaugh says that stuff is on the table for the offensive line, much like stuff is on the table for the outside linebacker group. Well, there's an opportunity that opened up yesterday that the Ravens could potentially double dip and get 2 guys in the building that could help this team try to turn their season around. Does the season feel over right now? Absolutely. 100%. Is it actually over? It's not over till it's over. It's not in a great spot right now. Like, I get that and I understand it, but the Ravens right now, and actually we'll go to the remaining schedule strength here, is the Ravens currently have the 7th easiest strength of schedule remaining. So there are a lot of questions. Could the Ravens be sellers at the deadline and trade away guys like Mark Andrews, or could they try to get guys in the building that can help them compete this season and hope to complete a pretty historic turnaround if they were to do it? Well, the Tennessee Titans fired Brian Callahan yesterday. It's the first head coach firing in the NFL this season. Comes after 6 weeks, and the Titans were, directionless. They were 1-5, same record as the Ravens. But apparently the plan was to hold on to Callahan through the season, but the Titans just looked so terrible and there wasn't anything positive, it felt like. So the Titans said, all right, you know what? We're done here. See you later. Actually, you could even look at the Nard Wilson watch. He was their former secondary DBs guy in Baltimore for a little bit. He went to Tennessee as their defensive coordinator, so he could be available this offseason potentially. But the Ravens now have an opportunity because Tennessee, clearly, they're not competing this season. I assume they're going to try to want to move off of some guys. Kevin Zeitler is on the Titans. My agenda has been, and my dream trade deadline scenario for the Ravens has been Kevin Zeitler and Calais Campbell. I've said that here on this show. I've said that on other places I've been. Dream realistic trade deadline scenario, knowing what this Ravens team does and knowing what picks they like to trade and what picks they don't like to trade. Kevin Zeitler and Calais Campbell seem very realistic. Now Kevin Zeitler seems even more realistic considering that he is on a one-year deal. Tennessee's not competing. I'm sure he wants to compete. And the Ravens need offensive line help. You plug in Kevin Zeitler for Daniel Falele, and I think the entire offensive line benefits from it. Because I mentioned with Linderbaum, I think some of the reasons why he's still, fourth in the grading system there for PFF, but I think that some of the stuff we've seen from him where it's been a little underwhelming, sometimes it's him, but sometimes it's the product of the players who he's playing next to, who are flanking him in that guard spot. And I think Zeitler would be a guy that wouldn't cost you a lot draft capital wise. You're going to have potentially 5 fifth-round picks in this upcoming draft. I don't want to see the Ravens draft 5 guys in the 5th round. I mean, you can trade for a guy that, it's an inconsequential trade in terms of the future. I don't think the Ravens are going to miss that 5th-round pick, personally. They have enough of them. And Zeitler could truly help turn this team around. Now, I also think that the other option here, if you want to get a little more bold and spicy with it, is the Ravens clearly need help on the interior. Nandu Metabike is out for the year. Well, Jeffrey Simmons is on the Titans. And Simmons would cost a lot more than a 5th-round pick. I mean, you're pushing a day 2 second rounder probably for Simmons, maybe a day 1. Maybe you're trading your 1st rounder there. I'm not sure. But Simmons would provide you a beast on the interior. I know there's some controversy with him and what happened with Marshall Yanda with the whole spit thing, but he would help the Ravens. I know some people are very in on Jeffrey Simmons coming to Baltimore. Other people are very out on Jeffrey Simmons coming to Baltimore. I know there are two sides, but he would be better than what they have right now. And again, Tennessee's not competing, and that there's a possibility that they just say, hey, you know what? We're going to try to get some picks of the future here. We know we're a couple of years away. And I think that both Zeitler and Simmons just got a lot more realistic for Eric DeCosta and company. And those are both moves that I would do if I were the Ravens. So, I mean, we'll see. I think Zeitler to me is like the one that is more realistic than a Simmons. And I think if it's not Simmons on the interior, you could go for like a Dexter Lawrence or a Quinnen Williams, maybe one of those guys. We talked about the outside linebackers, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau or maybe Judon in Miami. Miami's a train wreck right now. So maybe he's someone that can come in. Like, you have options here. I think Eric DeCosta does need to make a move, does need to make a couple of moves because, the way this roster is constructed, I mean, he's the one that does it. And while, I was talking about how good this roster was in the offseason, best roster in the NFL, it still had holes. And those holes are coming straight to the surface and eliminating all the depth. They have depth here, depth there, depth everywhere. Well, injuries have decimated that. The depth behind the depth, which I thought was so good, has not stepped up to the plate. And, Eric DeCosta needs to right some of these wrongs here that I think that he and this organization have made in terms of building up this roster, which again, is not a bad roster by any stretch of the imagination, but the holes have the potential to do this. And unfortunately, they're doing not so good things. So coming up with the final part of the show, we'll dive into some notes from the Ravens and Rams game. We'll dive into it a little more as we flip the page to the bye week and get into some things that the Ravens could build off of from that game. So stay tuned, plenty to dive into on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. Makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. And over on FanDuel, the Rams coming into that Week 6 game against the Ravens, they were 7-point road favorites. So Rams win 17-3. Probably living large over on FanDuel. Maybe you had Tyler Higbee anytime touchdown on that Ravens defense. Probably living large that way as well. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thank you again for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We do have that 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. So tell a friend, tell a family member if they want some daily Ravens coverage, send them our way. We have them covered just like we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. Plus, of course, you can follow me on social media, KOStreicher34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and as well as video communities growing so fast. We're almost to 16,000 subscribers, are about 300 away from that right now. And the audio form is growing at a rapid pace as well. It grows every single day. So whether you're a video watcher or an audio listener, thank you. Now, let's dive into some Ravens and Rams notes from week 6. Again, we did the instant reaction show on Sunday, and then we did the show on Monday. So we've had a couple days now to think about it, to go over some stats, watch some film, and talk about it. And there are some things the Ravens can build on and some things they, again, absolutely have to improve. And I think, again, I thought early on in this game, the Ravens did a good job offensively of opening up holes for Derrick Henry, committing to the run. They just ran it over and over again, and the Rams couldn't stop it. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the saying. But the problem was they fixed it in the second half. Derrick Henry had 18 carries at halftime, only 6 for the remainder of the game. Henry averaged 5.1 yards per carry. I thought they went away from that too early. And again, the play calling on offense was something I didn't agree with, and the lack of urgency late in the game when the Ravens had a clear opportunity to at least be competitive and try to win the game. That still bothers me, if I'm being honest, and kind of speaks organizationally. You know, we talked yesterday about Zay Flowers leaving the locker room before speaking to the media, and how he was ripped by Ravens media. And, you know, on social media, the fan base was getting on him for that. And, well, again, it's not a great look for Zay. Zay's not the only one doing this. Roquan and Marlon have been called out by the media from doing it as well. That, to me, is a reflection on coaching. It's a reflection on the leadership, and it's a reflection, honestly, on John Harbaugh, right? That, to me, is what the messaging essentially is with the team right now. Well, again, like, I think personally, you know, media responsibilities or obligations or whatnot, like, you know, players don't want to do it. Like, I understand that. But I think that, again, those actions are reflections on the coaching staff and on the leadership. And, you know, for me, seeing the Ravens essentially throw in the towel when they got the ball back with almost the entire fourth quarter to go in a game where you're down 14 points, just letting the clock roll down 5, 4, 3, that was to me like, okay, they're really giving up. And that was very, very disappointing. So I hope that doesn't continue, because, you know, I get that you're beat down, you know, the sequence happened at the end of the first half, but you can't have that. You can't have that. So again, there are some things, we talked about this yesterday on the field. You can do whatever you want, but until the stuff with the messaging and the leadership and all of that gets answered and resolved and everybody's on the same page, you're not going to win a lot of games. You got to get your guys on the same page. And for a coach in John Harbaugh, that one of these biggest redeeming qualities he's had over the last handful of seasons has been, oh, look at the players coach he's turned into, right? Look at, you know, how his guys will go to battle for him. You know, doesn't feel like that's the case this year. Feels like there's a lot of tension this year. And, you know, that when he's transformed himself into something that's worked and all of a sudden it's not, you know, you kind of got to evaluate there. Defensively, I think they did a really good job early in this game. Again, it was a lot of early stuff in this game. I thought the Ravens did well. Defensively, I thought they did a good job of getting the Rams in second and long and third and long situations. I thought that was really, really good from them, especially when it came down to, I guess they didn't necessarily capitalize on all the Rams' mistakes, because I thought that they could have won this game if they did that. But I thought that where I saw improvement was specifically, and it showed in the stats, like third down, the Rams went 4 of 10, which, you know, for the way the Ravens defense was playing, not bad. And then the big improvement was in the red zone. The Rams went 2 for 5 in the red zone, which, again, the Ravens defense coming into this game was awful on third down, awful on fourth down, awful in the red zone. And I thought they did really well there, at least relative to what we were used to them doing over the last couple of weeks, right? Like 17 points. You take that considering they've given up 37 plus in 4 of their first 5 games. But again, you see it like the pass rush. We talked about that. They didn't really do a great job, despite the fact that they're at least the edge rushers, right? The pass rush themselves, they did. Like John Jenkins, I thought played well. And, you know, you saw some pressure from other people, as we talked about, but the edge rusher department wasn't great. And, you know, I think the other thing was the play calling still, like Zach Orr rushing 2 on that fourth down, just, you know, too cute. We've talked about that a lot with this team. And then I think also some of the off coverage still was a problem. So I think that the Ravens right now, they have to kind of latch onto that good and say, hey, you know, we are getting healthy. And that's true. Like the Ravens are getting healthy. And that's the messaging John Harbaugh saying, right? Hey, we're getting healthy. We're getting our guys back. And, you know, we're assuming we're going to get Lamar, Roquan, like those guys, whether Lamar comes back, Roquan comes back, Patrick Ricard comes back, that will help. But the problem was, at least even defensively, even when Roquan was on the field, Defense still wasn't great. So we'll have to see how it all unfolds. But for the Ravens, they need to go on a win streak, and they need to start it after their bye week. So a lot of improvements that can happen over a bye week. The Ravens need to take full advantage of it. That's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content. So be sure to stay tuned for all that we have in store. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.